Well, another chapter just wrapped up, and while not much happened in it, there is a surprising amount to talk about. And it is for that reason I'm writing an actual script for this chapter review, rather than ramble incoherently in front of a green screen. Wait, what was I talking about? But to take it from the top, let me briefly tackle what happens in this chapter. Right out the gate, we see Jessica is still very apologetic towards Rachel for her play, and is trying to win her over. David shows up, and through the power of Teshi deciding she's done with this plot point, he explains how Jessica's play was actually a positive portrayal of her friends, and this puts all of the drama to bed. Sue looks on in disappointment as Jessica's play is showered with praise while hers was totally ignored by everyone. As Sue and Amaya walk down the hall an indeterminate amount of time later, she seethes over David's assessment. Also, Amaya most definitely has telepathy here, which is fine because Mike and Lucy still have laser eyes. So Sue starts venting about Paulo and Madison, despite Paulo being the one character that had nothing to do with the scene that they were walking from, meaning that the boy really does live in her head rent-free. I do want to point out this specific line, however. Imagine Paulo having an original thought, now I know where he got it from. It ties back to Sue's rebuttal in Critical Hit, where Paulo said that her play sucked, even David said so, and she responds with, "and you believe him." I thought this was an odd choice of words here, not discrediting what Paulo thought, only upset he just listened to David's opinion, and throws her play in her face. It is interesting that Sue calls Paulo out for believing David instead of addressing his actual opinion about her play. Here, it established that she believes that Paulo couldn't or wouldn't have thought her play was bad unless David told him to think that. She genuinely doesn't want to believe that Paulo thought her play was bad on his own accord and it had to be someone else's fault. It also makes sense when you consider the fact that Sue wanted Paulo to be part of the play since day one, which is extra weird because the play was specifically supposed to be about Mike and Lucy. Very interesting. Sue laments how people only talked about her play to tease her over it and almost starts crying. Then Paulo shows up and gives her a hug, telling her he didn't think it was the worst thing in the world, and Sue smiles and hugs him back. Wait a minute, I think I got my fanfic mixed up with this chapter. Oh, right, here we are. Sue finally makes a tearful breakthrough, admitting her play was more about forcing Mike and Lucy to be friends than anything else, and that she failed at both. This is when Jessica enters the picture, and Sue suspects Amaya of foul play. Madison assures Sue that her play didn't suck, Mike and Lucy did, making this a rare Madison W. Then she immediately hands it back in with an underhanded comment about Lucy trying to kill herself. And no, it is not lost on me that the punchline here is also very similar to the punchline that I made at the end of my video about method acting when talking about Sue's play. Sue's play was nothing like that. Sure, she had some detractors, but it didn't cause anyone to get upset or make things awkward or lead to anyone trying to hurt themselves. Oh wait, I have to go now. And this makes her realize that people didn't talk about her play because of what happened to Lucy. That her whole class knew the very next day that Lucy almost died, and presumably her too since she knows this information. Put a pin in that though. And so we hit upon something that has thoroughly confused everyone on all parts of the community spectrum. People knew about Lucy's jump? Is this true? And if it is, does this excuse the whole school not talking about Sue's play? So let's dive in before we continue and see if their class really could have known about Lucy's jump the very next day. And in order to do that, we're going to have to go all the way back to breaking up. Right out of the gate, it is confirmed that it takes place the next day after the play. Lucy isn't at school, and none of Lucy's friends seem to know where she is. This is when Lonnie walks in and announces that Lucy will no longer be attending Roseville High. And then we don't hear the rest. I assume this is Teshi's out, where she can later reveal that Lonnie told them Lucy had experienced some accident. However, the way the cast acts later doesn't fully seem to reflect something like that. And I say this because they aren't seemingly in any rush to knock on Lucy's door. If Lonnie had divulged an accident had occurred, they most certainly would have rushed to her house and banged on it. But Sue takes charge because she's peaked and Jordan answers, but swiftly slams the door shut. Paulo, furious that someone would slam a door shut in Sue's face, pushes her aside and demands to know what he's hiding and where Lucy is. Paulo somehow manages to climb this brick house and sees that Lucy's stuff is gone. Paulo drops down and bangs on the door, demanding to know what happened, but gets no answers and walks away. After time has passed and everyone is gone, Jordan leaves the house and is followed by Mike. Mike wants to know what happened, and Jordan lashes out at him. Mike refuses to back down, and Jordan reveals that he might lose Lucy. Mike realizes what's really going on now and bolts away to the hospital. And this is my second piece of evidence as to why Lonnie couldn't have told them Lucy had an accident, because the moment one of the characters is directly told, they run off in a sprint to see her. At the hospital, Lily tells Mike that Lucy will be okay and that she will be out in a week. Mike gasps, stating in shock, "She didn't." This 100% confirms that Lonnie did not reveal to anyone the nature of Lucy's leaving. None of them had any idea there was any sort of accident, let alone that she tried to kill herself or that she almost died. Now, I could stop here. It's a pretty open and shut case. What Madison says here is not only incorrect in regards to implying only Sue's class having seen the play, but also everyone knowing about her suicide attempt. But I want to cover all my Lucy bases, so we're going to take a look at a few more chapters just to confirm whether or not her friends at least knew about her jump at all. But right now, the list of people we know about her jump is Lucy's parents, Jordan, the pets, Mike. The next chapter, Leaving Home, also takes place the same day that Lucy left, and part of the next day. Mike is sitting alone under a tree an indeterminate amount of time later when Paulo shows up to fight him, but he just ends up breaking down crying. It is unclear if Mike told the rest of his friends about Lucy's jump. I guess it is technically possible, but remember, Sue's entire class was supposed to be in on it, so Mike would have to have told all of them, including the people that weren't in her class. It is possible Paulo found out somehow, and that's why he came back to fight Mike. Otherwise, he would have just stormed away and then came to find Mike later to fight him for no reason. Also, keep in mind that he has no reason to suspect Mike had anything to do with anything outside of Mike generally trying to avoid Lucy, so I'm not sure why he would blame Mike for the entirety of Lucy leaving. He literally does not have this information. We know this because later in Happy Hour, he goes aggro on Mike specifically for making her feel alone after Mike reveals what happened in December. Did Paulo somehow read December too? What's that on the ground? Is that December? So they walk it off. Mike walks home and notices some blue feathers, indicating something about Blur. Later, Mike is on the phone with Sandy and he reveals that a friend of his left that day, and we see a flashback panel of Blur announcing his exit from Mike's life. It is implied that Mike is referring to him rather than Lucy. I really don't know in the timeline of the day's events this would have happened, but it presumably happened between Mike leaving the hospital and before Paulo showed up while Mike was sitting underneath the tree. In Study Buddy, Sue gets suspicious of Mike, asking if he said something to Lucy, if he had anything to do with this. It isn't clear what this means, but at this point in the story we have not been given reason to suspect Sue knows about any sort of suicide attempt. I also want to point out that the only two people who aggro on Mike about Lucy's leaving are Sue and Paulo. Paulo just assumes Mike had something to do with it, while Sue is just very suspicious of him. These two literally share a brain. In Critical Hit, Sue throws Lucy in Paulo's face, but that's about it. And then Happy Hour happens. They try to figure out where Lucy went. Jordan still has not revealed to even Daisy what's going on with her. At no point is any sort of self-harm or suicide ever even alluded to, even when they are specifically talking about what could have happened to Lucy, outside of David's bullshit rumor that is played off as a joke of him being an idiot. Mike reveals to them what he said in December, and while Paulo is on the warpath for a single page, he relents. His friends are surprisingly lax on him, considering how depressed Lucy got toward the end, and I feel had they known that she tried to kill herself over it, they would have been far less gracious about his pity party. Yeah, she was mean to you sometimes, but you pushed her into wanting to kill herself. We also know that he didn't mention anything about any sort of suicide because later on in Double Down, when Paulo talks specifically about this moment, he never mentions anything about it, just that Mike had said some terrible stuff to her. In Dial Tone, part of Mike's dream includes Lucy dying for him, reaffirming that he knows about her suicide attempt. In Table for One, it's clear Madison not only doesn't fully know who Lucy is yet, but seemingly neither her nor Jessica know what happened to her. It's also strange that she doesn't really know who Lucy is because she's friends with Jordan and Lucy is Jordan's sister, so maybe Madison wasn't really friends with Jordan at that time. But Jessica is friends with Jordan, so did she just never tell Madison about that? But this line implies that Jessica did tell Madison something about Lucy. Did she neglect to tell her that Lucy and Jordan were siblings? Because if not, this doesn't make any sense. And also, this is just kind of a weird thing to not tell her. Madison, the same girl who is now saying everyone knew about Lucy's jump the day after it happened, is explicitly stating she doesn't know what happened to her. So I guess at this point, Jordan hadn't said anything to her. Or it's possible that Madison found out after Table for One that everyone in Sue's class knew the day after, which is extra fucking weird that she would somehow find out this specific information months after it happened in a whole new school year. Like, how would she even know that Lonnie said anything or what specifically she said? Or how would she know that the whole class found out about it? And if Lonnie didn't say anything about Lucy having any sort of accident, as we've already established that she clearly didn't, then how did the whole class find out about it? In Love Again, Lucy returns, but no one mentions mentions any sort of suicide attempt. I know I keep bringing that it isn't being brought up, but don't worry, I will come back around to it. Here, the audience finally gets to see what happened the night Lucy left. So sometime after Lucy rejected the talent agent, she wandered out into the snow. I am going to assume this was after she returned home and she wanted to go for a walk to clear her head. She spirals in her mind, and she goes to the warehouse we saw her standing on before in 10 Seconds to Midnight. She leaps off this time, and Augustus shows up, he phones an ambulance, and she's taken away. In the present, we see Lucy's whole family, including Sam. This brings the list of people who we know that Lucy jumped to: Lucy's parents, Jordan, the pets, Mike, Augustus, Sam. And after you, Paulo and Lucy go to a carnival, and the bulk of the pertinent discussion takes place on the Ferris wheel. Beforehand though, Paulo does tell Lucy that everyone was upset she left, but he doesn't mention them being upset about anything else regarding her exit, or them being worried about her self-harm. And then Lucy reveals that she was never supposed to return to Roseville. It's an interesting point, though only because we don't know specifically why she did decide to return. Paulo brings up that she just transferred out and that her parents forced her to leave. However, Lucy rebuts part of this and reveals she agreed to go, which doesn't match up with what she thinks to herself the night of the play, which is that she was being forced to leave. Though it is possible that Lucy felt like she had to agree to it. Keep in mind, she was in a pretty bad place at the time. Lucy also says she decided to leave the day after rehearsals. So right now, according to Lucy, her parents wanted her to leave Roseville permanently, and Lucy agreed to do this so long as she got to do Sue's play first. Then Lucy says that she did the do with Paulo to tide him over because she knew she would be gone forever. This could have just been a poor choice of words on her end, because the act of tiding someone over means that they are simply going to be going without something for an extended period of time, so you are doing something to help ease that period until they get that thing again, like Lucy giving Paulo what he wanted until she's able to return. This is to imply that Lucy was planning on returning at some point, which goes against what she just said about being gone permanently, but like I said, it could have just been a poor choice of words on her end. Or maybe Lucy meant that having sex with Paulo would tide him over until he got over the shock of her being gone forever, but wouldn't giving him what he always wanted with no indication of her leaving forever just make things worse? I guess we can chalk much of this up to her being in a very unstable place mentally when she decided to fuck him, so she wasn't thinking clearly. But she has had time to internalize all of this, so it's still an odd thing to say here. She then says she thought that she could get away with it and she would never have to see him again, reaffirming that the original plan was for her to never return to Roseville. We also know that this can't be her referring to her killing herself, because that mental spiral was spurred on by something Mike said after the play. This is later reaffirmed by Lucy specifically saying she did stuff with Paulo because she was leaving. At no point does Paulo broach the subject of Lucy's jump or any sort of self-harm. In High Expectations, Paulo lashes out at Lucy, telling her if she was going to avoid all of them, she should have just stayed gone. I feel like if he knew about her jump, he wouldn't have said this, because it implies she should have just died, and clearly Paulo doesn't want or mean that. And it's all in the mind, Sue and Lucy have a heart-to-heart about her leaving, and Sue asks if anything else happened beyond her going to another school. Now this could be interpreted one of two ways. She could have asked this because she legitimately didn't know, but suspected something else happened, or she does know about the jump, but didn't want to broach it fully unless Lucy wanted to talk about it. The only way to really tell which one is by Lucy's expression. This could be Lucy's surprise of Sue hinting that she knows more than she thought, or it could be her thinking about whether or not she wants to divulge the information to begin with, or it could just be both. But without actually being there and hearing the way Sue asked the question, it's kind of difficult to tell. For example, if she had asked it like this, "Was that all that happened?" It would imply that she did know something happened, but she was too scared to broach it unless Lucy wanted to talk about it. Or she could have said it like, "Was that all that happened?" Like she didn't know what else happened, but she suspected something might have. Whatever the case is, she turns down the opportunity to say anything, and Sue looks away sheepishly. Maybe I am stupido, but this seems more like Sue just didn't know, but suspected something more happened, which would also mean that we know that Sue at least didn't know anything about Lucy's jump. Nothing more is said about Lucy moving away. Double Down hits, and we get confirmation that the whole senior squad knows about the jump because of what Madison says, which makes sense as they are Jordan's close friends. Though it's odd that Jordan would wait so long after Lucy came back to reveal anything, let alone not having told any of his close friends beforehand, as by now Madison has screamed at Lucy several times. I suppose at a certain point Jordan stepped in and explained the situation off screen, which is great because we like it when character development happens off screen. But still, it's kind of weird how Madison knew Sue's whole class knew that Lucy almost died the day after Lucy jumped. I guess Jordan somehow became privy to that information, despite it now having been established that Lonnie never told anyone in the class that Lucy almost died. I legitimately have no idea where Madison, or even Jordan, got this information, unless Madison's guessing wildly and being hyperbolic to help Sue feel better. It's possible Jordan just assumed Lonnie told them, but like, okay, weird way to go about doing this. Mind you, all of this is total spitball guesswork on my end. I literally have no idea. This means the list of people that we know about Lucy's jump is Lucy's parents, Jordan, the pets, Mike, Augustus, Sam, Madison, Jessica, Matt, Rachel. Later when Paulo walks her home, he wants Lucy to open up about what's been eating her, but she refuses, and then Paulo starts yelling at her, throwing all this stuff in her face, except for her suicide attempt. Specifically, he mentions her disappearing for months and not talking to them about it. Lucy then claps back with her leaving because she tried to kill herself, which is totally not true, not just by what we know about what was decided by her parents earlier, but from her own words in After You. It is possible she didn't want to mention this being the reason she left in After You, but even then, it still wouldn't have been true. Further evidence is that we see that she is still set to leave Roseville when she leaves the house the night of the play, and these plans were already made up in 10 seconds to midnight. Lucy is an unreliable narrator, either that or Teshi just forgot what she wrote. Paulo, who has never shown any sort of indication he knew about Lucy's suicide attempt, replies with a total non-response about how he doesn't want that to happen again, and how he doesn't want to just sit on the sidelines to see that happen. So, does this mean he knew the whole time and just never brought it up ever? And if he didn't, this is the absolute weirdest way for him to respond to hearing that information for the first time. You'd think he'd stop dead in his tracks, words caught in his throat as he tries to register what Lucy had just said, and then they move completely past it. And so now the list of people we know about the jump is Lucy's parents, Jordan, the pets, Mike, Augustus, Sam, Madison, Jessica, Matt, Rachel, Paulo. And finally, in present day, in participation trophy, Madison reveals that Sue's whole class knew the day after it happened that Lucy almost died, which Sue doesn't react to at all, which either means she knew the whole time and never said anything, or she didn't know and just didn't react to that information. I guess this lends credence to the idea that Sue did know that Lucy tried to kill herself way back in It's All in the Mind, or highly suspected of it. And so now the list of people that we know about the jump is Lucy's parents, Jordan, the pets, Mike, Augustus, Sam, Madison, Jessica, Matt, Rachel, Paulo, Sue. And the reason I mention this list at all is because very clearly Teshi doesn't have an issue with directly showing people being told or finding out about Lucy's suicide attempt. So that leaves me to wonder, why not show everyone else finding out too? Why be so cloak and dagger about it? I get that Teshi wanted to keep the suicide a secret until Lucy returned for the reader's sake, but now this has caused a massive elephant in the room that the entire time people were talking about Lucy, or accusing Mike of foul play, or learning about that foul play, that no one, not once, ever mentioned or alluded to Lucy trying to kill herself. Now, it is possible that what Madison said is still true, that somehow, despite it being very clear that Lonnie never said that Lucy had been in an accident or was even hurt, everyone in Sue's class knew about Lucy's jump. And I don't even know what Madison means by that because Sue has more than one class. I can only assume she meant her homeroom class, as Sue has shared a homeroom with their friends since freshman year. Or does she mean class as in her whole grade? But we aren't shown them learning about it either. But this still doesn't line up, as we know for a fact that students not in Sue's grade or homeroom attended the play, so how does what Madison say even make sense as to why no one else at the school talked about the play? And if they or just Sue's homeroom class were all so busy with the knowledge that Lucy tried to kill herself, how come we never see them talking about it? And how did Madison not know about it? It is made very clear that they are sad about her leaving, never them being upset that she almost died. It is possible that they could be sad over both, but we are never shown them talking about both of those things, just the one thing, Lucy leaving. And once again, that could all just be hand waved with they didn't want to talk about it, which I guess is understandable. But that just feels like poor writing to me. It feels like Teshi once again keeping stuff vague so she can decide later what she wants things to mean. And even if that's not the case here, I shouldn't have to dig through all of this stuff to try to piece together whether or not this is a massive plot hole the size of a galaxy. It should be very clear that they all knew about it at the time it happened and not retconned in later. This is the same shit that happened with Behind Closed Doors, where now there's just a massive unresolved elephant in the room because we're all confused as to why characters are now acting the way they are. Like Mike being completely baffled as to why Paulo is ignoring Daisy. And now this with, well, why didn't any of Lucy's friends say anything about her jump? It seems like an even bigger deal than Lucy simply leaving to go to another school, and not talking about it or alluding to it at all at any point seems suspiciously to me like Teshi originally intended Lucy's jump being revealed to them all later as a major plot point. But then she decided later on from that she didn't want to do that anymore. And then instead of writing a scene where they all learn about Lucy's jump, or making it very clear that they all know about it, she just ignored it. At worst, this is a massive plot hole that could honestly be easily mitigated by Teshi rewriting this one line to remove anything from it to do with Lucy nearly dying, and at the very least, we can all agree that this is just very poor conveyance on her part. This isn't being a galaxy brain writer where you gotta wonder if Leonardo DiCaprio is still in a dream at the end. This is a writer who sometimes simply cannot decide what she wants to do. And the problem here, and the problem with all of this, is that the reader shouldn't have to pull teeth with the comic to figure out who knew what. A lot of it requires you to read between the lines, except the lines you're expected to read between are also not there. Something else I want to mention is that this chapter was originally meant to be part of method acting. I'm not sure why Teshi said this was part of a scrap chapter in her Blue Sky, when very clearly we ended up getting this chapter anyway. And if that was the case, we only get to see the senior squad talk about the play? Why is Sue acting like the whole school is fawning over the play? Your play didn't suck? Your actors sucked? Bullshit. After Madison shit talked the play and Rachel tries to assure Sue that Madison is just kidding, Madison disagrees. Yeah, Sue, I didn't know that saying your play was incest and I wasn't kidding about it would get to you. You know, you should have just known that it wasn't how I really felt, even though I started referring to Lucy as that incest bitch. Anyway, moving forward, Jessica reveals recess is almost over, which I guess she meant to say lunch because high schoolers don't get recess. Sue walks away feeling a bit better, but tells Amaya not to lead her to ass pats again, though Amaya still does just that, and they run into David and company. And David lets slip that he was told to apologize, and James lets slip that it was Amaya that did it, and Sue looks quite unhappy about this, and David reaffirms this by talking about how angry Amaya was. Also, this is the first time that Amaya is referred to as they, them pronouns in the comic. Don't think I didn't pick up on that. But David gives a YouTuber apology by not actually apologizing, then runs off after seeing how fired up Amaya and Sue are. It's all good because James says the play sounded epic because apparently he was somehow friends with the track team who we know aren't in Sue's homeroom, and they told him, further putting a hole in Madison's statement about why nobody talked about it. And then he starts rizzing up David to Sue's dismay, meaning Sue wasn't upset or blushy because she secretly likes David. Sue wants James to cut the crap, but James and her have totally differing views on David. Paulo interjects, teasing Sue about liking David, and this sets her off hard. Then she said she'd bang his skull with a hammer, which is pretty violent actually. I mean, you can just say you don't like David without threatening to do something like that to him. That is for me to do. But James does a big ol' think during all of this and comes to one logical conclusion, that Paulo and Sue are the ones that have a crush on each other. And think about it, everything they're arguing about here is not describing Sue and David's dynamic, but her and Paulo's dynamic. They're projecting onto each other. Paulo's mouth opens so wide you can fly an Airbus through it, and Sue is so flustered she can barely speak, only managing to ask what's so funny. She looks down more flustered than ever, and James brings it back around to David, and Sue tells him he isn't helping. And the interesting thing to point out here is that when she gets called out for maybe liking David, she vehemently denies it, but when called out for liking Paulo, she never denies it once. All she wants to know is why Paulo is laughing. You know what? I take it back. I take it all back. Every mean thing I said about James, this comic, Teshi, I take it all back. This right here is undeniable, indefensible, 100% without a shadow of a doubt, proof that Sue does in fact have a crush on Paulo, and I was right the entire time. Even people that didn't want to believe Pue was real now believe because of these pages. Some of y'all owe me an apology. Participation Trophy is a chapter that didn't need to exist, and I'm not even sure why it wasn't part of method acting when it seemingly was originally meant to be, but I'm sure glad it's here. However, it does potentially open up a massive plot hole, or at the very least, poor conveyance of information regarding the knowledge around Lucy's jump. Yes, it pretty much confirms Sue has a crush on Paulo, and I am vindicated on that, but at the cost of, well, all of the confusion that takes up most of this video. But it also hammers home another theory of mine that appears to be true now, that David is smarter than he lets on, but he's too much of a dunce to take advantage of it most of the time. So yeah, Paulo and Sue are the same level of intelligence, it's just that Sue tries too hard and Paulo not enough. I have been saying this for a while now, and hopefully you guys can see what I mean. With all of that being said, if it weren't for the Pue tease at the end, honestly I'd have written this chapter off as a nothing burger with a possible plot hole, but that's not the reality we live in, fortunately. Participation Trophy is by far not the worst chapter in the comic, and honestly not even the worst chapter in the modern art style era, and it might not even be a bad chapter if it hadn't been for this potential plot hole. But what do you guys think about this chapter? Is what Madison said here a plot hole, or is there some easy explanation for all this? And do you believe in Pue as I do now? And any other musings you have, let me know below, and I will see you all next time.